Rise, my apprentice.
Our story begins with Ahsoka taking Maul back to Coruscant. As the cruiser moved steadily through hyperspace, Ahsoka sat alone in her quarters, her mind still racing from the events of Mandalore. She closed her eyes, attempting to find calm through meditation. But instead of peace, the Force surged around her, pulling her into something far more intense. Suddenly, she was no longer aboard the ship. Visions flashed before her eyes, disjointed but unmistakably real. She saw Coruscant, the Jedi Temple in flames, Mace Windu locked in combat with Anakin. Her breath caught as she watched Anakin strike Mace down, his face twisted in rage. Before she could fully grasp the scene, the vision shifted. She saw clone troopers, familiar faces, her friends, but they had turned. Blasters raised, they fired on the Jedi, one after another falling in the chaos. She could feel their betrayal, the confusion of the Jedi, and the overwhelming sense of dread. The final image came with a suffocating weight, the rise of the Empire. Darkness swept across the galaxy as a figure in dark robes stood at the center of it all, his presence casting a shadow over everything. The Republic was gone, replaced by something far more sinister. Ahsoka gasped as the vision ended, her heart pounding in her chest. She was back on the ship, but the horror of what she had just seen clung to her like a shadow. The weight of the vision still pressed heavily on Ahsoka's chest as she returned to the bridge. She knew the future was unfolding, and she had to act immediately.
Rex, pull the Venator out of hyperspace,
Ahsoka commanded, her voice steady but urgent. Rex blinked, taken aback by the sudden order.
Commander, pulling out of hyperspace this early could destabilize the ship. We might crash into—
Rex, listen to me. If we don't stop now, everyone on this ship will die.
Rex studied her for a long moment, searching her eyes for any hint of doubt. He found none. Ahsoka was dead serious, and her certainty overpowered his concerns. With a sharp nod, he relayed the order to the crew. Ahsoka stepped to the center of the bridge, her focus intense as she reached out through the Force, sensing the patterns of hyperspace around them. The turbulence was intense, but within the chaos, she saw an opening, a narrow window where the ship could emerge safely.
Now!
She ordered. The Venator lurched violently as it tore free from hyperspace. Alarms blared and the ship rocked under the strain, but it held together. Slowly, the stars returned to their normal, distant pinpricks in the vast black of space. Ahsoka turned to Rex, her expression softer now.
Thank you. I have to go, but we'll see each other again. I promise.
Rex hesitated, his brow furrowing.
Commander, where are you?
Trust me, Rex.
Without waiting for a response, Ahsoka headed for the hangar. She took one of the smaller ships, her departure swift and quiet. As she flew into the void, she could feel it. Order 66. The sudden shift in the Force was like a scream in the darkness. The Jedi were falling, one by one. The clones had turned, just as her vision had shown. Ahsoka's ship touched down on the lower levels of Coruscant, and with her hood drawn tight, she moved swiftly through the shadows of the city. She stayed off the main thoroughfares, blending into the crowds, using her familiarity with the city to make her way toward the Senate District without drawing attention. Her destination was Padmé's apartment. If anyone knew where Anakin was, it would be her. Reaching the building undetected, Ahsoka bypassed the main entrance and took a familiar service route. Her senses remained sharp, aware of every subtle shift in the atmosphere around her. As she approached the door to the apartment, a feeling of dread settled in her chest. Inside, the space was silent and empty. Ahsoka scanned the room, hoping for any sign of recent activity, but there was none. Her heart sank. She needed answers, and with no one there to give them, she turned to the apartment's security system. It took only moments for her to pull up the most recent recording. The footage showed Anakin, his expression tense as he spoke to Padmé. The message was clear. He had left for Mustafar. He believed it was there that he would put an end to the war. Though the recording offered some clarity, it also brought a growing sense of unease. The weight of her vision pressed heavily on her, and she couldn't ignore the unsettling change in Anakin's demeanor that she had seen in the footage. She now had a destination, Mustafar. Ahsoka knew time was against her, but she had to try. If her vision was to be prevented, she had to find Anakin before it was too late. As Ahsoka descended toward Mustafar, she caught a glimpse of a ship leaving the planet's surface. She recognized it immediately as Obi-Wan's. Her pulse quickened, knowing that wherever Obi-Wan had been, Anakin was likely close by. The planet's landscape was a hellish sight, with rivers of molten lava snaking across the blackened surface. The heat was oppressive, even from the cockpit. After landing, Ahsoka stepped out, the intensity of the heat immediately pressing against her. Reaching out through the Force, she could feel Anakin. His presence was overwhelming, but it was filled with anguish, pain, and suffering unlike anything she had ever sensed from him before. Following the pull of the Force and their connection, she moved quickly across the unstable terrain, her heart racing with a mix of fear and urgency. When she finally reached him, her breath caught at the sight. Anakin lay on the edge of a lava bank, his body scarred, burned, and broken. The damage was severe, his clothes charred, and his breathing labored. For a brief moment, he looked at her, his eyes filled with pain, before he lost consciousness, unable to fight the agony any longer. Ahsoka wasted no time. She carefully lifted him, supporting his battered frame as she carried him back to her ship. Every second felt like a race against the inevitable. Once aboard, she secured Anakin in the medbay, doing what little she could to stabilize him. As she prepared for takeoff, she sensed another presence approaching, the darkness of the figure she had seen in her vision, Palpatine. Ahsoka didn't wait to see him. She launched the ship into the air, narrowly escaping the planet as Palpatine's shuttle descended toward the surface. Ahsoka navigated her ship to Police Massa, the remote medical facility hidden away from the galaxy's turmoil. She knew it would be the best place to bring Anakin, secure, secluded, and equipped to handle the extensive medical care he needed. But what awaited her upon arrival caught her by surprise. As she landed, she was met by Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Bail Organa. Their presence could only mean one thing: Padmé was here. Ahsoka's suspicions were confirmed when she saw Padmé being wheeled into the facility, her condition critical as she prepared to give birth. Obi-Wan's shock was immediate when he saw Anakin aboard Ahsoka's ship. His eyes widened, filled with disbelief and caution. He stepped forward, his hand outstretched as if to stop her.
No, Ahsoka, you can't.
But Ahsoka, driven by her conviction, pushed him aside. Her tone left no room for argument as she moved Anakin toward the medical team.
He needs help now,
was all she said, her focus solely on saving Anakin. Obi-Wan hesitated, caught between his own anger and the deep bond he had shared with Anakin. But Ahsoka didn't wait for his approval. Anakin was taken to a room adjacent to Padmé's, where medical droids immediately began to work on his broken body. His burns were severe, and the process of outfitting him with cybernetic replacements began bit by bit. The damage was extensive, but the facility was prepared. In the room next door, Padmé fought through her own ordeal, but when she saw Anakin, weak and scarred, through the glass separating them, it gave her a strength she hadn't known she had left. She knew he was alive, and somehow that was enough. Hours passed, and eventually, Anakin was placed into a Bacta tank, the fluid surrounding him as it worked to heal his body and scars. Next to him, Padmé gave birth to twins, Luke and Leia. Unlike the future Ahsoka had seen in her vision, Padmé survived, the knowledge that Anakin was still with her, giving her hope for whatever lay ahead. The air in the meeting room was thick with tension as the remaining Jedi gathered. Obi-Wan stood with his arms crossed, his expression hardened with doubt. He had seen too much, and the trust he once held in Anakin had shattered. Across from him, Ahsoka pleaded for a different perspective. She had seen Anakin at his worst, but she knew there was still good within him.
Anakin is not lost. I felt it. The darkness may have clouded him, but there's still light. We can't abandon him now.
Obi-Wan shook his head, his brow furrowing.
He's dangerous, Ahsoka. You saw what he did. We can't afford to be reckless.
Yoda, sitting quietly in the middle, had been listening carefully. His disappointment in what had come to pass was evident, but his wisdom extended beyond the failures of the past. His eyes shifted to Ahsoka and then to Obi-Wan.
Since the light in Skywalker, I still do. Clouded his path has become, but necessary to bring him back it is. For the Jedi's survival, for peace.
The room fell silent as Yoda's words settled over them. Even Obi-Wan couldn't deny the truth in them, though the doubt still lingered in his eyes. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Anakin floated within the Bacta tank, his body weak but slowly healing. His eyes fluttered open to see Yoda standing on the other side of the glass, watching him with a calm, knowing gaze. The two locked eyes, and in that moment, Anakin understood the weight of what was happening. Yoda stepped closer, placing a hand gently against the glass. His eyes closed, and through their deep connection in the Force, Yoda began to channel his energy into Anakin. Slowly, carefully, the healing process accelerated. Anakin's burns and scars began to mend under the influence of Yoda's powerful healing. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka stood nearby, watching in awe as Yoda used the Force with a mastery they had never witnessed before. It was more than just a healing. It was an act of restoration, a sign that perhaps redemption was still possible. As Yoda finished channeling the Force to heal Anakin, the peaceful atmosphere in Police Massa was shattered by the ominous arrival of a Venator-class Star Destroyer overhead. The dark presence was undeniable, A shuttle descended from the massive ship, touching down with eerie precision. Stepping out, cloaked in shadows, was the Emperor himself. By his side walked Darth Maul, his gaze filled with fury and vengeance. Though Sidious could have brought an army, his thirst to personally destroy the last of the Jedi made him confident enough to come with only his most dangerous ally. Inside the medical facility, alarms blared as Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Ahsoka prepared for the inevitable. The doors slid open, and in walked Sidious and Maul, their combined presence sending a cold wave through the Force. Without a word, the battle began. Maul launched himself toward Ahsoka, his red-bladed saber whirling with deadly precision. Ahsoka met him with fierce determination, her agility matching his every strike. Sparks flew as their sabers clashed, the two locked in a battle of equals, both determined, both relentless. On the other side of the room, Sidious wasted no time. His lightsabers ignited, crackling with energy as he faced Yoda and Obi-Wan. Lightning arced from his fingertips, forcing the two Jedi back. Yoda deflected the bolts with ease, while Obi-Wan closed in, his blue blade flashing as he engaged the Sith Lord. The duel was a blur of motion, a deadly dance of light and dark. Sidious moved with terrifying speed, his strikes unpredictable and brutal. Obi-Wan fought valiantly, but Sidious was relentless. With a twisted smile, Sidious found his opening. His saber pierced through Obi-Wan's defenses, delivering a fatal blow. Obi-Wan collapsed, his body falling lifeless to the floor. Ahsoka's heart sank, but there was no time to grieve. Yoda, now alone against the Sith Lord, intensified his efforts. The small Jedi Master moved with astonishing speed and grace, countering Sidious's every move. Their fight raged on, the air thick with the crackling energy of the dark side and the calm resolve of the light. Meanwhile, Maul gained the upper hand in his duel with Ahsoka. With a swift, brutal strike, he disarmed her, sending her lightsabers flying across the room. As Maul raised his saber for the killing blow, a sudden, invisible grip tightened around his throat. Maul froze, his eyes widening in shock. From the shadows, Anakin emerged, his body healed, but his eyes glowing a sinister Sith yellow. With a slow, deliberate movement, Anakin clenched his fist, the Force tightening its hold on Maul. In one swift motion, Anakin snapped Maul's neck, the sound echoing through the chamber as the former Sith apprentice collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Anakin stepped forward, his presence now fully revealed, and joined Yoda in the fight against Sidious. The Emperor, now facing the combined might of Yoda and Anakin, fought with renewed ferocity, but Anakin's power, fueled by his connection to both the light and the dark, was overwhelming. Together, they pressed the attack, their lightsabers moving in perfect harmony. Sidious, though powerful, was no match for the combined strength of the Chosen One and the Grand Master. In a final, desperate attempt to summon more power, Sidious unleashed a torrent of lightning, but Anakin caught it with his hand, absorbing the energy and redirecting it back toward the Sith Lord. The dark energy surged through Sidious, consuming him, and with one last, agonized scream, the Emperor was destroyed. The chamber fell silent. Sidious lay dead, and with him the darkness that had plagued the galaxy for so long. With the death of Palpatine, the grip of the dark side over Anakin finally loosened. The weight of his choices, the pain and destruction, seemed to lift as he stood in the aftermath. The Sith were gone, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was a glimmer of hope for peace. Back on Coruscant, the remaining Jedi and their allies worked tirelessly to reveal the truth. Proof was presented to the Galactic Senate, evidence that Palpatine, the man who had risen to power under the guise of a protector, had in fact been the Sith Lord orchestrating the war from both sides. The Senate was forced to confront their own blindness to his manipulation, and in a stunning reversal, the Empire, which had existed for a single day, was dissolved. The Republic was restored, and the Jedi, though decimated, were welcomed back if they so chose. But even as peace began to return, it was clear that not all wounds could be so easily healed. Anakin's role in the destruction left many uneasy. The Republic, desperate to restore order, saw him as a symbol of both their failure and the war's devastation. Despite his part in ending Palpatine's reign, there were those in power who wanted him held accountable for the atrocities committed during his fall to the dark side. Faced with this harsh reality, Anakin and Padme made the only choice they could. They fled the public eye, taking their newborn twins, Luke and Leia, with them. Together, they would go into hiding, seeking to live a quiet life, free from the reach of the Republic and its justice. As they disappeared into the stars, the Republic began its slow recovery, but the galaxy would never forget the scars of war, nor the choices made by the once chosen one.